Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Ellen Voie, who is President and CEO at Women in Trucking. And today we're going to talk about the benefits and challenges of attracting more women in trucking. Now, this is a topic that is, getting a lot more attention these days than ever before. I think partly driven by all the discussion we've been having this year about there being a driver shortage in the industry, and companies looking at ways to resolve that and looking at other pools of talent out there that have been underrepresented, if you will, in the industry, and certainly women and bringing more women into the industry overall is a goal that many companies have. And I had the pleasure of meeting Ellen a few weeks ago at an industry conference and invited her to be in the program so we can discuss this topic further. So I'm happy Ellen is here to kind of share her perspective and thoughts and experience in this whole area. Before we get started, I just want to remind those of you that are joining us live that if you do want to, part of our goal here at Talking Logistics is to make this interactive. So if you have a question or comment for Ellen as we're having our conversation, you can do so via the chat feature or the question button, and I'll keep an eye on that. And certainly, if it's a good and appropriate question, and we have time, I'll try to weave it into the conversation. And finally, if you are joining us as a visitor, you do have to sign in first before you can ask a question. So, with that, Ellen, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Adrian.
So, Ellen, kind of before we dive into the topic, people that are listening today may not be familiar with Women in Trucking. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about the organization, and then how and why did you get interested in the trucking industry altogether?
Sure. Well, Women in Trucking is a nonprofit, member-based organization. We're what we call a 501c6. And we have about 4,000 members around the United States, Canada, and a few other countries. But basically, our mission is threefold. First, is to encourage the employment of women in the trucking industry. And that would be whether they drive the truck, build the truck, design the truck, sell the truck, own the truck. Regardless of what your role is in the trucking industry, that's what we're here to support you in your employment. And secondly, to address obstacles that might keep women from either entering the industry or succeeding in the industry. And I know we'll talk more about what those obstacles are. And the third part of our mission is to celebrate the success of our members. So we have a lot of recognition programs. We want to highlight the women who have been pioneers in the industry and who have been successful. So basically, we're here to increase the percentage of women in the trucking industry. And currently, those percentages are about 5% of females. Our drivers are 5% of drivers are female, and about 14% of the leadership team in the trucking industry is female. So a little bit about my background. I was always kind of interested in engines and things like that. So in high school, I lobbied to take shop class. I still don't know how to cook, so but I can I can tune up an engine and change oil and do welding actually. But so I took shop class and I got a job at a steel fabricating plant in their drafting department. And one day they came to me and they said, "Would you be interested in moving into traffic?" And I said, "What's traffic?" And they said, "Well, we'll double your salary." So my career in the trucking industry was started. They sent me to school for traffic and transportation management. So I got my diploma in that, was assistant traffic manager, became traffic manager, worked there for a number of years. And then when I started my family, I used that knowledge, licensing and permitting. I was able to keep the trucks and the drivers legal, tariffs, rate bills, things like that, and driver qualifications, things like that. So I did that for about 18 years. And then in 2000, I was hired by Trucker Buddy International, the Pen Pal program. And from there, I went to Schneider National. And at Schneider, my job was to try to figure out how to attract and retain non-traditional groups. And one of those groups was women. They said, figure out what it is that women are looking for in a truck driving job. And that's when I realized that this industry really wasn't looking at how to really accommodate women as drivers. And so I started Women in Trucking in 2007, and here we are 7.5 years later, and we've grown to this. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm excited.
Great journey there. And I think it's interesting that you clarified, because I think when people think women in trucking, the immediately first thought is, drivers. And obviously that's a key area of focus, but, really it is a broad, cross-section of opportunities within the trucking industry, not just driving, that are opportunities for women. Now, I can't change my own oil, or if you all the engines look the same to me. I could cook, so maybe we can trade roles there at some point. Like I mentioned in my opening, comments, there's a lot of discussion these days about, the driver shortage, and, it seems that attracting more women, to the industry would alleviate the problem. And I think you mentioned that, you may want to repeat it, the percentage of drivers that are women today, but what are some of the challenges that have been kind of present to prevent women, to, enter the industry in bigger numbers?
I would say that the biggest challenge that we face is an image problem. And I don't mean an image, necessarily a negative image because of the driver, the negative driver image, but it goes beyond that. The image that this industry has is that it's a very male-dominated culture. So women don't even consider a role here, whether it's working in the safety department or dispatching, things like that. When I talk to women about working in the trucking industry, they just kind of look at me like they hadn't thought about it. So we have an image problem. We need to reach out to the non-trucking public and say, we have great jobs here, we want you, and we value you. And so we have to change the way our ads look. We have to change the way our facilities are. We have to change a lot of things, but we really need to change the image of this industry and stop allowing it to look like a good old boys, male-dominated environment.
Yeah, no, I think, and that's something we talked about at the conference a few weeks ago that we were together, because we started part of the image problem that we talked about is also that, this industry is a job versus a career, right? And really being able to communicate the career opportunities that you can have, where you may start out as a driver, you may start out in another department within an organization, within the trucking or transportation industry, but over time you can grow and evolve into different roles. So I think that's another kind of aspect of the image problem. Do you agree?
I do agree. If you ask, I ask at a lot of conferences, how many women came, or in high school actually thought about a career in the transportation industry. Rarely do people raise their hands. We all get here for some other reason, like some boss coming in and saying, do you want to go to the traffic department? So we need to start talking to young girls about careers in the transportation industry, and the fact that it's not, it currently is male dominated, but the more women we bring into the industry, the more that culture will change.
Yeah, that's a great lead into my next kind of point that I was going to raise, where, a few years ago I wrote a post saying that we kind of need to educate our youth about the logistics industry, right, in order to inspire them and make them aware that this industry exists, right? High school guidance counselors and so forth. In order to, the way I wrote about it is almost like a baseball analogy. In order to really create this farm system, starting at an early age, right, to get people inspired and aware of the role that transportation logistics plays in our everyday lives and in the economy and so forth. And obviously, you just mentioned making that, when you ask high school students, about this industry, nobody raises their hands in terms of knowing what it's about or that there's opportunities there. I mean, are there things you're doing in that area that kind of help the youth kind of understand, and even more specifically, young women and girls, about the trucking industry?
Actually, there are, and that's one of our biggest goals in the coming years. We recently came out with a Girl Scout transportation patch. We found out that the Boy Scouts had a transportation patch and the Girl Scouts didn't. Actually, the boys had a badge. There's a difference between a badge and a patch. A badge is initiated at the national level. So we had to pilot with a patch. And last month we had 84 girls in inner city Chicago earned the first ever transportation patch through Women in Trucking. And we set up a curriculum, and we had them. We had a speaker talk about how she designs trucks. We had drivers and instructors there. We had the girls come out and look at the trucks and sit in the trucks, and we talked to them about careers. And I think one of the exciting things was that we opened their minds to the possibility that that may be a big truck, but you know what? You can do the job. Some of the other things that we've done, we have worked with the Department of Transportation on what skills are required so that we can go into the high school level and talk about jobs in the transportation industry, whether it's dispatching or safety or driving. There's a lot of different skills that are required. And that's a great lead-in to some interesting programs that are done in Sweden. They actually have their youth go into, after middle school, when they go into high school, they're tracked, and they're either tracked into an academic line of studies, or they're tracked into a vocational line. And in the vocational line, they look at their aptitudes and their what they'd like to do, and they're sending girls into transportation-related careers, whether it's mechanics, whether it's drivers, different roles, and they've found a dramatic increase in the number of girls entering these professions. So I think we could do a lot better about showing girls that, you know what, you can do this. I mean, one of my goals, I'd like to see a doll, whether it's a Barbie doll or some other doll of a girl driving a truck, and maybe some more toys and electronics and games that show young girls doing this, a video game or something like that. But we definitely need to start saying to young girls, you know what, see that truck out there? You can do that. You can drive that, and you can make a decent living, the same as a man.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up that kind of example there in terms of taking a vocational track, because I think overall, I think there's greater recognition in the industry, not just with women, but with others in terms of overall there's a shortage of logistics talent, right? And I think there's a perception issue out there in the sense that a lot of folks think, well, you need a 4-year degree from an MIT or University of Tennessee or one of these name brand universities, and certainly those there are roles and those universities play a role, right? And there are people that's the right path for them, but I think we're also missing an opportunity for folks that may be able to get more specialized associates training or vocational training and really enter the industry much more quickly, much more into some of these entry-level roles and really work their way up. And certainly, with that in mind, that becomes another entry point for women and even other minorities or other folks that are underrepresented in the industry. You talked about earlier about kind of the perception, or which reality it is a reality in terms of this being a male-dominated industry, even though women are playing a bigger role in it. And one thing is kind of attracting and hiring more women to enter, right? The other thing is kind of to retain them, right? And we all know the challenges that women kind of face across all industries, right? There's a lot of talk about getting paid less than men, sexual harassment and bias and so forth, and that's, you see that in the trucking industry as well. I mean, what do you hear from women drivers about the work environment? I mean, what is it that they enjoy the most about what they do, and what are some of the things that they view as ongoing challenges or things that need to be improved upon?
I'm glad you asked that, because we work with the University of Wisconsin Stout Research. It's a graduate students who do research for us, and we actually did research on that question: what attracts women into the trucking industry? And the top reason was pay, because women know that they can make the same as anyone else behind the wheel of in the cab of a truck. The second most important reason was independence, and the third was family. A family member was in the industry. So it used to be, a lot of sons and nephews and grandsons went into the industry because they had a role model, a dad or uncle or someone who was in the trucking industry. That's the third top reason why a woman enters the industry. And when I said there was 5% female drivers, that comes out to about 180 to 200,000 individuals who are employed, females who are employed in the trucking industry, out of 3.2 million drivers. Of those 180 to 200,000 female drivers, 50 to 60% of them are in a team configuration. So they're many of them are brought in through a husband, a boyfriend, a dad, a brother, something like that. And that's what attracted them in the industry. And they continue to drive in a team environment, which is, that's great, but we need to be sensitive to that. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is women are more social. So, being in a team isn't as, hard on a female as it might be for a male who likes the independence and the privacy. But safety. Safety is another reason why a lot of women run in a team configuration. But one of the things that attract women into the industry differently than men, and I need to also state this, Adrian, I didn't mention this, but 16% of our members at Women in Trucking are men, because we're not necessarily for women, we're more about women. But to get more women in the industry, women want to feel that they're adding value. So we need to really focus more on how does that carton of milk or that loaf of bread get on the grocery store shelf, so that women feel like they're actually adding to the supply chain and doing something for the benefit of our community or the country. So we need to tap into that value system for women and use that to say you're adding something, a very important part of the supply chain. And so that's one of the things that attracts women that isn't as high a priority as for men.
Right. Now, what are there? What do they view as perhaps some of the things that they like to see kind of improved, or some of the challenges that they may want to see overcome?
Some of the challenges are safety. Safety comes to the top. So we work with the travel plazas on lighting, security. We also help our drivers understand how to stay safe, and things like don't park in the back, don't walk between trucks, make sure you have a flashlight and your keys with you and a credit card if you get out of the truck at night, things like that. So safety is a top concern. Women are much more situationally aware, though, at a truck stop than some of their male counterparts. So that's a good thing. Harassment is still out there, unfortunately, and you can talk to almost any female driver and they'll tell you that other drivers have given them a hard time for tapping into their work environment. And I've actually had men tell me that, and I want to preface this with, most of the male drivers out there are very accepting and very understanding and very welcoming to female drivers. It's the one or two loud voices that you seem to hear the most. So when I say this, I want to say that most male drivers out there are wonderful, but the few who have a hard time have told me that they think that women shouldn't be in trucks, and they think that, one guy told me, he said, I've always felt like a big macho, powerful guy, and when I see a 98-pound female jumping out of the cab of a truck, it kind of deflates my ego. So we need to understand that for some guys, it is an ego thing. But you know what? They need to get over that. So there are some issues out there. And then equipment challenges. We work with the truck manufacturers. We're actually implementing some design changes in adaptability for the cab. So think about this. You've got most women in a team configuration, and if the wife or girlfriend is 5'2" and the male is 6'4" or whatever, the truck has to be adaptable. So that means pedals, it means steering column, it means seats and seat belts and the dash and the handles getting in and out, steps, things like that. So we're working with the truck cab manufacturers and making them aware of some of the issues that might be more of a challenge for a smaller statured female and a smaller male.
Well, that leads me to kind of my next question, because your organization works with a wide variety of companies involved in the trucking industries, and not just trucking companies, right? You've got driving schools, truck manufacturers, private fleets, insurance companies, a whole list of different companies. So why is it important to kind of get all these different stakeholders and types of companies involved, and what's the benefits for them, and even more importantly, what's the benefits for women in the industry?
Well, when a manufacturer like a Freightliner or Navistar, Volvo, or trailer manufacturers join Women in Trucking, They join because they support our mission. They join because they want to see more women in the industry. They want to see a healthy industry and more diversity. There's a lot of focus on diversity, especially in larger companies. So we all know that the more women you have in a leadership team, the greater the voices, the more representation you have. The truck driving schools, I was amazed at how many truck driving schools have joined women in trucking, but they want to tap into our research and our knowledge on how to attract women, what to put in recruiting ads, how to retain women, why do women leave this industry, and then vendors. A lot of vendors will join because they also realize that if you're making something for the trucking industry, and the trucking industry is suffering because it has a capacity issue, then we're all hurting. So, and then for the drivers, we have, of our 4,000 members, about 1,300 of them are drivers, both male and female. And so drivers join because they again support our mission, but they see what we're doing to make their lives better. They see what we're doing to work with the companies on harassment issues and recruiting issues and equipment things, design changes. So I love it when a male driver will walk up to me and show me his Women in Trucking pin at a truck show and be proud of wearing that. So and then, as usual, we're a nonprofit organization with member benefits. So we do have some discounts on products and services. And in the past year, we've actually started a charitable wing of our organization, which is a scholarship foundation. So we're actually providing scholarships to people looking for education in one of 4 areas. And that would be leadership area, a safety area, a technical area, and then driver training. So Women in Trucking Scholarship Foundation also is part of our organization.
Excellent, excellent. So, I mean, you've been around since 2007, is that right?
Yes.
So, as you look forward now, next 5, 10 years, I mean, when it comes to women in trucking, I mean, what are some of your goals and objectives? I mean, what would you like to see accomplished, 5, 10 years from now?
I would like to see the number of female drivers at least go from 5% to 10%, which would add about 30,000 drivers right now, and that's currently the immediate driver shortage. So if we just doubled the female drivers from 5% to 10% in the coming year, we'd solve our immediate driver shortage, not the long-term one. But secondly, I'd like to see more acceptance of women in the industry from all of us. I'd like to see some changes in culture. And instead of it being a surprise when a woman is fixing a truck or a safety director or jumps out of the cab, I want people to accept it and not have it as something that's an anomaly. I'd like to see us get more exposure to the non-driving public, and so we've had drivers on in Oprah magazine, and we had a driver show Ricky Lake how to drive a truck. But I want to see more of the mainstream media pick up on what we're doing and say, hey, look at this. There's great jobs and careers in the trucking industry. One of the things that we started focusing on is ride-alongs. So we've asked Secretary Anthony Fox to do a ride-along. He's agreed. And also Administrator, FMCSA Administrator Scott Darling. We want to have them ride in trucks with our members so that we can highlight not only the fact that women drive trucks, but the fact that we have great jobs and women can fill these roles. And then I'd like to see, like I mentioned earlier, I'd love to see like video games and toys more focusing on the positive aspect of the trucking industry. And then lastly, as far as image, I would love to see us be able to change the image for our neighbors so that they don't think that a career in the trucking industry is a last resort or that you can't do anything else. And maybe we can finally get the high schools to start, sending, potential candidates our way so that they can start learning about the industry and then become a driver when they're old enough.
Yeah, those are all great goals and objectives, and I think some of them are probably easier to achieve than others. And I think changing the culture is probably the one that's the most difficult and the one that's probably going to take the most time, just because, we all come with our existing, biases and perceptions in there because of what we've been exposed to and seen or heard or whatever. Kind of analogy, I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I was on a flight, and I was surprised that the pilot and the co-pilot were both females. And I think it was the first time I had ever been on a flight where the folks up in the cockpit were females. And I don't know why. I don't know why it surprised me. It shouldn't have surprised me. But, I think when you say airline pilot, you tend to picture a male, right? And I think similarly, when you think truck driver, you've got this, I guess, stereotypical image of what a truck driver is. And I think by sharing some of these stories, and I think you talked about earlier in terms of part of your mission is to showcase some of these women in not only driving roles but other positions there in the trucking industry, to really get those stories out and show the role that women are playing across a broader role, across a broader cross section of the industry.
Actually, Adrian, I'm glad you brought up the pilot issue. First of all, I am a pilot, and so I love it when I see a female pilot in the cockpit. Remember, I said I love engines, so. But the airline industry is also suffering from a shortage of females. They're at about 6%. And so we've done a lot of research with them on what are some of the challenges that are similar between female pilots and female truck drivers. And one of the interesting things that I find is that time away from home seems to be a huge factor in why we lose so many drivers. Well, in the airline industry, they can't use that excuse, because look at all the flight attendants out there who are on the same airplane and spending the same amount of time away. So it's an image problem. It's also getting women interested in transportation careers at a young age. So instead of saying you can be a flight attendant, say you can be a pilot. We really need to push that.
Great. No, great additional insight there on that. So, we're kind of short on time here. So just as a way to wrap up, I mean, what advice would you give to women who are interested in pursuing a career in the trucking industry? I mean, what questions should they ask, and what action should they take today to get started?
Well, I would say ask around. I mean, start talking to women who are already in the industry. Find a role model. Do your homework. And for the driver population, they really need to do their homework. They need to understand what truck driving schools are the best schools. They need to really understand what carriers are the best carriers, whether the carrier has a pet policy, which is also important to female drivers. That's another safety issue. Where the loads are going, what the home time is, whether the company really does have an open door policy, things like that. They need to be really focused on their surroundings and being safe and making sure that they take precautions until we can have a safe work environment for drivers. I think that women especially need to be careful. But for women looking at leadership roles in the trucking industry, I'd say go for it. The trucking industry is, to me, one of the best industries and very welcoming and very it's not going to be a good old boys network for very much longer, I can tell you that. So I'd say go for it, do your homework, find someone inside the industry that you can talk to, and ask a lot of questions.
Well, with that, Ellen, great advice. Again, thank you very much for making the time today to share with us your thoughts and perspective on this topic, which I'm sure we're going to continue to hear more and more about in the weeks and months and years ahead. So again, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for having me on your show.
Great, and I want to thank those of you that joined us live today. We didn't get any questions, but if you are watching this program on demand on talkinglogistics.com, you can go ahead and if you've got a question or a comment for Ellen, you can search for the episode there on talkinglogistics.com and post a question or a comment there, and I'm sure Ellen will be more than happy to respond via that medium. So with that, again, thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.